Good evening, delegates. We'll be beginning shortly. Please take your seats. Thank you. We will wait a few minutes for more delegates to arrive. Thank you. Good evening, colleagues. We'll call this session to beginning. We will resume our session this evening with the consideration of items remaining on our agenda. However, before we resume, I would like to recall the outcomes of this morning's session, as I was advised that interpretation was not available in the final minutes of the session. This morning, we considered agenda items 27, 23, and 25 of the COP, and item 15 of Nagoya Protocol MOP 4. As a result of this consideration, 2 CRPs were approved and will be posted as LDocs to plenary. They are CPs 11 on synthetic biology and CRP 10 on health. Now, turning to this evening's session, we will resume with the consideration of COP item 23, biodiversity and climate change, Nagoya Protocol CRP 8 on specialized international ABS instruments, Nagoya Protocol CRP 7 on global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism, the COP CRP 13 on the multi-year program of work of the COP, and following consideration of these CRPs, we'll then consider a report of the working group. Thank you. We will now resume discussions of this morning on COP item 23, biodiversity and climate change. This morning I heard divergent views on the way forward regarding this item. My assessment is that there is no consensus on continuing the consideration of CRP 12. Is there any other assessment otherwise? I see no request for the floor. Therefore, I am taking that to mean that my assessment that there was no consensus to be correct. Therefore, confirmation of my assessment. I have a motion for you. Are there any objections that this item on climate change be referred to SUBSTA? Are there any objections that this item be referred to SUBSTA? I see no objection. Just a minute, please. Thank you, United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, but could we just have some clarification on your last point? Thank you.
After this morning's discussions, we realize we have no consensus on moving forward with the CRP in question. So therefore, I'm asking the parties if we may defer or refer this item to SUBSTA for consideration at the next SUBSTA meeting. Are there any objections that this item on biodiversity and climate change be referred to SUBSTA at its next sitting? United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And though we sincerely appreciate the efforts made by the chairs to resolve the issues we've seen in this item, we have lost much of the text discussing key terms for the theme of biodiversity and climate change, as well as some really important context. And we feel that in Working Group 2, we should not be working in silo from Working Group 1 and the conversations that are taking place within the GBF. And there are real cross-cutting Thank you. There are real cross-cutting issues in this decision that have of course been also the most contentious, mainly on nature-based solutions and CBDR. And given these contentious issues remain in brackets, we suggest that perhaps, or we ask instead that this is resolved as a package when Target 8 and BBAs are finalised instead. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me a minute to confer. Thank you. I see another request for the floor. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to support the intervention of UK, which we find is a good way forward. Thank you.
I see another request for the floor. Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you very much for your guidance and your suggestion. As you have mentioned, there are several ongoing discussions, but our priority is the GBF. And you fail to understand why to have a decision be stalled because discussions on GBF. Just imagine now if every party that has a problem with a different subject will start cherry picking which CRP, which L documents we would choose because they were expecting negotiations on GBF. We'll never finish these negotiations. And furthermore, I want to recall my statement earlier this morning when there was a suggestion to close discussions on Nagoya and defer for the next intersessional period in the next COP. And I said that was agreeable if there was fairness in the treatment of different issues in the same way. And I accept that with understanding that the same would be applied to climate change. I said that from the floor. I said that in front of everybody. And no one opposed that at that time. And you follow doing this, and you defer the discussions on the Article 4.4. So again, we're trying to do our best, working from the floor in the plenaries, consultatively engaging, and we're just requesting to have a fair treatment among parties and among issues. And I would be extremely cautious to engage in such cherry picking and hostage of issues because of GBF. So I would like to follow what was agreed early this morning and defer this issue to Substa, as you mentioned. I fully support you. Thank you.
May we hear from Algeria, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My delegation shares the same feeling as the delegation from Brazil. We do believe that we still have only 3 days left. 3 days left to try to capture what we can in the GBF, and all our efforts needs to be forwarded toward the success of the GBF. Therefore, we would like to support your approach by deferring this agenda item to the substack. Thank you.
Thank you, Algeria. So based on the last two interventions, I'm asking the parties again. Are there any objections that this item be referred to SABSTA? I see Iceland. Iceland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, in terms of, and in light of the discussions in the group, Friends of the Chair, and also in the contact group, because we didn't have issues like technical or scientific issues sort of hindering an agreement. It's more like technical issues. So I'm just wondering if we're referring this issue to SUBSTA, what would be the request for SUBSTA to look at? It's just a seek of clarification. Thank you, Madam.
Because of the lack of consensus This came from SUBSTA, so we thought if it went back to SUBSTA, there would be further discussions, more maturing of the topic, more consideration of it, and then hopefully it can come back in a format that we all can accept. So therefore, I'm asking again, are there any objections that this item be referred to SAPSTA? Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate your efforts to find a solution to advance this item. We, along the same lines as Iceland, are wondering which document would be used as the basis for the discussion at SUBSTA, if it would be the previous SUBSTA recommendation, or if it would be the CRP document in brackets. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would suggest the recommendation 23/2 from SAPSTA made at this 23rd meeting. I see Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's to express our support to Brazil's intervention for the issue to be referred to SUBSTA. Thank you.
I see Ethiopia. Ethiopia, you have the floor. Can you give Ethiopia the floor, please?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, from the beginning, we accept nature-based solution in order to lift up all brackets. So if that didn't happen, and if CBDR is in bracket, I think this is what we cannot accept it. I support the idea raised by Brazil, Argentina, and Algeria. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethiopia. So therefore, are there any objections that this item be referred to SUBSTA? I see Philippines. Philippines, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Philippines also supports the Chair's proposal of referring this item to SUBSTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippines. So therefore, we can prepare a paper asking for this, requesting that this be referred to SUBSTA at its next meeting. I see the UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And we aren't coming in opposition here, but we would like to ask the Executive Secretary to review the latest scientific inputs and perhaps develop a paper for consideration at the next SUBSTA to go along with this. Thank you.
And if I understand, that is to take into consideration the age of the previous document, 23. Okay. I know somebody had pressed the button, but I don't see them anymore. I don't know if their mic is not working. Because okay. All right. Okay, so we can make those. Okay, I see Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I apologize, but I think that part of the problem is exactly the INF paper prepared by the Executive Secretariat. And I want to recall that the Executive CBD Secretariat has no competence whatsoever on matters of climate. We can rely on works of IPCC. So Brazil will not be willing to have such a request at this moment. And furthermore, and most important, and then I think that's an argument other parties will agree with, is that the Secretariat will be overloaded with the work with the GPF, the implementation of GPF, and supporting parties to review and update their NBSAPs and start implementing the GPF. So we don't understand that would be fair to the Secretariat to overload them with this extra work when the main focus and our main priority is the GPF. Thank you.
Okay, so therefore, Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all want to find the compromise that we can live with. The Secretariat, this paper is not only about climate, it's also about biodiversity. The Secretariat definitely has that competence. We would like to support UK in requesting that if this is to go back to Substa, then they could review the latest scientific input and prepare a new paper based on this. This would give us the opportunity to work together to improve the decision even further before the next COP. I think we have showed great willingness now to do this, and we feel this is a possible compromise. Thank you.
I know Ecuador wanted to speak because it keeps coming and going, but it's your Ecuador, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We were asking for the floor to support the two statements made by Brazil. We consider that we should go back to the original request, namely to put this paper that we've worked on and put that to Substa so that they can continue to work on it.
Let's hear from EU, followed by, not Ecuador again. I think EU followed by Switzerland, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. EU supports the intervention of UK and Norway. We think it's very important that if this is referred back to Substa, that new scientific information is to be taken into account in this work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, EU. Let's hear from Switzerland, please.
Yes, we would also support those last interventions by the EU, the UK, and Norway, because we think that much of the discussions we had here raised technical questions that would be useful to go more in depth with, particularly as we are bridging different topics here, and we want to concentrate on biodiversity and see how we move forward on this subject. So we think certainly it would be the least we could do to prepare for the next technical session with more information for those countries who have voiced a lack of clarity on some of the concepts. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is that, yes, we can send it to Substa, but we are concerned about the basis. We will draft some text as to where that basis would be the best thing that we can come to, a compromise that we can come to, and we can present it to the parties. So give us a little bit with that, please. I see Canada and then Brazil. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Canada supports the EU, the UK, Norway, and Switzerland. We think it's important for the COP to consider science-based recommendations in making decisions. We would support the request to the Executive Secretary to prepare an updated document based on the most current science. And we support this compromise to move this item forward to Substa for further consideration on this basis. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May we hear from Brazil, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And Brazil fully supports the statements made by EU and Canada. when they refer to the importance of relying on scientific-based recommendations and inputs. So I remind us all that the CBD Secretariat is not a scientific technical body. IPCC is the main scientific technical body to deal with climate. So in a willingness to compromise, what Brazil would be willing to accept as a way of moving forward is to request the Secretariat, invite parties to submit suggestions on how to deal with climate, biodiversity and climate under CBD, and request the Secretariat to compile these views for consideration of SUBSTA. And then I think it's up to each party to rely on the best scientific evidence, for example, the IPCC, and put forward what they think is the way to deal with this issue under CBD. And again, it would be a demonstration of willingness to engage constructively to others, because as I said in my previous intervention, we will be overloaded with the GBF, NBSAP's review and update, overload with trying to get implementation of GBF, and this is actually a diversion from CBD main area of activity, and we do have more appropriated for to discuss climate. Therefore, I made this appeal to parties to focus and prioritize GBF, because I understand the common priority here is the GBF, although that's not seems the case from the several interventions we had. I regret that. But if there is this willingness to, let's say, update information for consideration of SUBSTA, I would be willing to consider the possibility, and I'll wait for your test, Madam Chair, that we invite parties to submit suggestions on how to deal with this issue under CBD, and request the Secretariat to compile these suggestions. And then SUBSTA taking that into consideration, and SUBSTA can make a recommendation to CBD on how to address this issue at the next COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. May we hear from Iceland and then Argentina? Iceland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Iceland would like to support the suggestion by Norway and the statements by UK, EU, and Switzerland and Canada. In terms of the workload of the Secretariat, I'm not sure that the Brazilian suggestion is helping the decreasing the workload, so I wouldn't be happy to support that suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Iceland. Let us hear from Argentina, followed by Algeria. Argentina.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And we wish to echo Brazil. We have to remind ourselves of the mandate of this convention and its scope. We're not a climate change convention. The IPCC is the technical body that deals with technical affairs or scientific affairs related to climate. And there has been already many documents discussing this. So we believe that the Secretariat is not the entity that should be producing a new document. We fully support the suggestion to send this document for review of the SUBSTA. But in case that the parties have suggestions that they might wish to make, our suggestion, and perhaps we could check this if possible with the Secretariat, would be to have a process, like my Brazilian colleague said, of comments, some sort of peer review, and the Secretariat could compile these views that would allow parties to submit their scientific inputs as well for consideration of SUBSTA. And I think that would be a valuable input to update the document when necessary, and also avoid overburdening the Secretariat. And we know that the implementation of the GBF will demand many efforts of the Secretariat. So I don't think it's a convenient time to put more burden in the Secretariat that has already a lot of tasks under the decisions that we are adopting to implement the GBF. So I suggest caution, and we fully support Brazil and your proposal, which is a wise solution to this dilemma. Thank you.
Thank you. We are putting together your ideas. Give us a minute, but let's just, in the meantime, hear from Algeria, Uruguay, South Africa, and then the EU. Algeria.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We totally support the approach proposed by Brazil and Argentina. We do believe that at SEPSTA, member states need to have a full overview about the topic and how to deal with it. So therefore, we support them and for the same argument. Thank you.
Thank you. Let us hear from South Africa, followed by EU, then Uruguay. South Africa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'd also like to support Brazil and Argentina and Algeria. If we recall recently, the IPCC had done some work already on this and produced a report. I think it was a special report on land and climate. So there's a good baseline to build from. And recently there was a workshop report that was produced by both the IPBES and the IPCC as well. So, you know, we've got a good baseline there to start from. So we'd like to support the procedure that Brazil articulated. Thank you.
Thank you, EU, followed by Uruguay and then Norway. EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor again. We would like to remind of the excellent work that has been carried out by the CBD over the last 10, 15 years on the topic of biodiversity and climate change. Excellent work of SAPSTA and COPs, and we have subsequent COP decisions on this important issue, which is rising in importance as climate change is becoming the major driver, accelerating all the other drivers on biodiversity loss. We know all this, hence we really would reiterate the request that has been made by Norway, UK and Switzerland in order to continue this good work. We deeply regret how this draft decision on biodiversity and climate change has not been come to a conclusion here. We think your way forward is now probably the last solution, but we really think that the good work that has been done by the CBD and its Secretariat should be continued in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, EU. We have Uruguay, followed by Norway, then the Philippines.
Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair. We share the proposal made by Brazil. As was mentioned this morning, there's the UNEA resolution on nature-based solutions and the question that there's different visions from the parties that need to be brought forward to see where there are divergences and where there are common points. So I think it would be useful to get these contributions from the different parties, and then that can be summarized, synthesized, and worked on in SUBSTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Uruguay. Please hear from Norway, then the Philippines.
Thank you very much. We are a strong supporter of IPBES, our own science panel here for the biodiversity. So we would like to support the intervention of South Africa and EU, and they have had a good kickoff with the joint workshop report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Norway. Let's hear from the Philippines, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Philippines also aligns with the proposal from Brazil, as echoed by Argentina, Algeria, and Uruguay. And we believe that the contribution of the parties in this work is very much important as well, so that as to unload the Secretariat from their work at the moment, especially with GBF, and the consultation with IPCC in reference to IPBES as well. That would be very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, and then we have Colombia as the last. Thank you. Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't pass the opportunity to intervene, of course, to show support for Brazil's proposal. I think it's a constructive proposal that allows us to actually work further and strengthen this topic, as we've seen that is badly needed. So I thank Brazil and Argentina and the rest of my colleagues for wanting to actually make an exercise worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Columbia. So I think we have our paragraphs almost ready. Give me 1 minute, please. So therefore, I'll thank you for giving me that little time. We'll ask the secretary to read the operational paragraphs, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the operational paragraphs that summarizes the consensus that's evolving in the room reads as follows. There are only 2 paragraphs, and the first paragraph reads, requests parties and invites other governments and international organizations to submit their views and information on biodiversity and climate change, and requests the Executive Secretary to compile these views and information and make the compilation available to SBSTA. So the second paragraph reads, requests the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice to further review the item on the basis of views, the item on biodiversity and climate change, that means, on the basis of views and information from parties, other governments, and international organizations, as referred to in paragraph 1 above, and relevant scientific and technical information on biodiversity and climate change, including the scientific outcome of the IPBS-IPCC co-sponsored workshop on biodiversity and climate change at its meeting to be held prior to the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties.
Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. It was really quick, and the Secretariat also was very quick to bring this solution to us. It's exactly what we heard from the floor, with only one exception, and I want to recall that actually there is no such IPCC IPBES workshop, because they were never reviewed, discussed, adopted, or approved by neither plenaries or the IPCC or IPBES. So there is no such thing as an IPCC IPBES report. Those that go to the internet and download the report, there's a huge disclaimer there saying exactly this. This workshop was not reviewed or not discussed or adopted by parties of the plenaries of IPCC and IPBES, and for this reason, Brazil requested the deletion of the reference to this document. Thank you.
Argentina, you have the floor, and then the EU.
Thank you, Madame Colide, and I'm sorry to bring this up again, but I support Brazil because over and over in every meeting, every discussion, this workshop comes up, and it's not a peer-reviewed document. So we ask you to kindly remove this item from the list of things to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. We'll hear from the EU, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to remind parties that this IPCC co-sponsored expert workshop report that is mentioned here has been a deliverable that was requested by members of IPBES at IPBES 7. It was never meant to be reviewed by parties. The co-sponsored workshop was carried out exactly in line with the procedures that have been foreseen, and the outcome of it is truly outstanding, as has been proven by its wide use of stakeholders and decision makers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Give me a minute, please. Is there an objection to deleting that part, including the scientific outcome of the IPBES IPCC? Is there an objection to deleting that bit so that we can move forward with clean text? So therefore, it would read, the second paragraph would read, request the SABSTA to further review the item on the basis of views and information from parties, other governments and international organizations referred to in paragraph 1 above, and relevant scientific and technical information on biodiversity and climate change at its meeting to be held prior to the 16th meeting of the COP. Is there an objection to having that sentence read that way? I see two requests for the floor. The UK followed by Iceland. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and we would like to support the points made by the EU on the importance of the IPCC IPBES workshop report. This was a really important piece of work that did follow procedure. We think it's a really, really vital piece of scientific input for this decision, and we would really like to see that here. And we would also like to highlight that we were able to welcome cooperation between IPBES and IPCC and take note of the co-sponsored workshop report in paragraph 7 of item 15 on the IPBES rolling programme of work. So we should be able to include reference to that report here. Thank you.
I see Iceland followed by Brazil, then Norway. Iceland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just like the two previous speakers, we would like to retain the reference to the IPBES report. Thank you.
Thank you. So two halves, so we need to find something in the middle that we can say. So what else can we say? Well, is there another way? Because we're having parties who cannot accept, and we want parties who have to have, but we have to have a common ground. And in between. So therefore, I'm asking parties to please, let's see what text we can use, please, that will be right in the middle, something that both views can take, please. I see Brazil followed by Norway, then Colombia. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I will not repeat myself regarding that this document was not prepared along the rules of procedures of either of platforms. Well, I'll keep to myself, but what I'm going to say is that if there are parties, what we request is that parties submit views. If the parties that are willing to consider this workshop as an input, they're free to do so. They include in their submissions. I don't see what's the problem here. If there are parties that think this document is so important for them, they refer to it when they submit their proposals. I think that, again, Madam Co-Chair, I think that I made a clear demonstration of willingness to compromise and accommodating concerns of other parties. And I failed to understand why and I thought that would be a very quick decision we were going to make. And I failed to understand if it's such an important document, they can bring in their national submissions to this compilation that, yes, we're preparing for consideration of SUBSTA. They are allowed to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Let's hear from Norway, followed by Colombia. Norway.
Thank you. We would like to support what UK and Iceland have said, and EU. We see it's very important to have a reference to IPBES, which is the scientific panel of the convention. If we are to base our discussions in the next SUBSTA meeting on science, we fail to see how this will come out from submissions by the countries, the parties alone. We would like to see it supported by assessments or some type of work done by the IPBES, and we welcome also the collaboration between the IPBES and the IPCC, which has been requested by the parties. We think there is much to take from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Let's hear from Colombia, followed by Algeria. Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. Just to find middle ground in this, I completely understand Brazil's reservation, and they have stated this countless times before. This is not the first time that they've expressed this inconformity. Maybe a way to go about it, just as he suggested, that parties may or may not willingly take this under consideration, the results of this workshop. Could we say that in the text? Parties may take into consideration the results of the workshop? It could, or as appropriate, or if considered, or etc., but something that gives the flexibility on whether or not this information wants to be included in national considerations. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia, for your providing compromising text, which we will work with and see what we can work through to get. Let's hear from Algeria, followed by Argentina. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My delegation fully supports the text that just has been read by the Secretariat. We do believe that in the fact that we are keeping it open, that is more broader, that will let SUBSTA to bring any issue, any document at a later stage. We cannot narrow down the approach that will be discussed at a later stage. So for us, we need to be very broad, very general in the way we approach it. Thank you.
Thank you, Algeria. Let's hear from Argentina, then Ecuador. Argentina, please.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And if my memory serves me well, I recall that the text proposed by the Secretariat also invites other relevant international organizations. It's not only the parties, it's very broad, this possibility of providing inputs. So at this point, I think the concerns by our colleagues from Europe and other parties that have this concern are already addressed in this text, because other relevant organizations include the IPCC, IPBES, so they can also provide their insights. And regarding the suggestion by our colleague of Colombia, we thank her for the effort, but we believe that it's not proper for the COP to tell parties what to consider or not. Parties are free to consider whatever input they might wish to provide. So we believe that the way out of this conundrum is just to address the possibility of inviting other relevant organizations, and then you have all the potential to get input from these very specific and technically qualified organizations like IPCC and IPBES. Thank you.
Let's hear from Ecuador, please.
Thank you. Ecuador apoya la...
Ecuador supports the final text that was presented by the Secretariat, and we agree with what Argentina has just said. We think this text gives lots of possibilities for countries to contribute. There's lots of options, so it can be reviewed by SBSTA, and it also invites us to cooperate with other scientific organizations. So we think that the final text is much better. It covers everything.
Can you give me a minute to confirm, please? We have a suggestion, perhaps, a proposal to put before you. What if we say, as a footnote, that the reference to this document does not necessarily indicate its acceptance by all the parties? Would that be something that we could work with? A footnote saying the reference to this document does not necessarily indicate its acceptance by all the parties. I see Brazil. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really fail to understand why you're willing to complicate things. I mean, if the paragraph already, as my Argentine colleague brilliantly said, we're inviting IPCC and IPBES to bring inputs. We're inviting parties to freely choose what inputs they want to. I really fail to understand why do we need to include this IPBES IPCC workshop. And then if you start highlighting something, then I'm afraid that we'll start to have a list of several different documents, regional documents, whatever. So let's make it easier. Let's make it easier. What's the point of make reference to a specific document, and in particular, a specific document that clearly say that was not peer-reviewed? We're talking about the best scientific evidence. And you open the document, the first thing you see is this document was not subject to peer-reviewed. What scientific base are we talking about? So again, I think I've been trying to compromise here. And again, I've said this several times. We fail to understand the rationale of having climate change discussions here in the CBD. Parties want to have the discussion. Okay, we compromise. Let's have the discussions. Now, we need to get everybody on board and discuss in a free and fair way. So once more, I think that I've been making several steps towards consensus, and I hope that's agreeable. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Let's hear from the EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to take the floor again, but I mean, just for clarification, the IPBES IPCC expert workshop was peer-reviewed. Just to be said, there were 50 hand-picked scientists, IPCC co-chairs, IPBES co-chairs, co-lead authors, putting this very important work for us together. I think we should give it the respect it deserves. Thank you, Madam Chair.
May we hear from South Africa, followed by Argentina. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and we appreciate the opportunity. It looks like, Chair, we'll be going back and forth, similar to what transpired when we were discussing the target itself. We probably need to take this chair and make a determination and make it open that parties are welcome to consult further than the applicable bodies in this particular matter, so that when we come back, whatever statements that have been made are, supported, but also are based on some of the references that parties are openly welcome to consult. Thank you very much.
Thank you, South Africa. Let's hear from Argentina.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And frankly, I fail to see why the insistence of thinking that not mentioning one report of a workshop means disrespect for the scientists. That would mean that if we don't mention the Global Biodiversity Outlook or IPBES reports, we are disrespecting IPBES scientists that participating in all those reports we have just taken note of, welcomed, like sustainable use, and we're not mentioning anything of that. So not mentioning the whole library of reports doesn't mean one that disrespects these institutions or these scientists, because it's not institutions. And also, may I recall our colleague that during the plenary of IPBES, there was an agenda item dealing with the collaboration with IPCC, and the executive secretary mentioned that IPCC had not answered their invitations to meet, to work together, because of some unknown reasons. So I believe we are taking this matter further beyond what's wise, and we should sort this out with a clear text like the one proposed by the Secretariat that opens the door to any relevant organization that wishes to contribute insights. And that will allow plenty of room for any scientist that wishes to provide inputs. It's very simple, it's very elegant, and it will save us a lot of time so we can go on with our business and finalize what we need to approve tonight. Thank you.
May we hear from Switzerland, please?
Yes, chairs, we really appreciate the efforts you're making, the Secretariat is making to find wording that accommodates the views expressed by the parties. Maybe we could support you with saying something on the lines of request SOBSTA to analyze the Secretariat to analyze the relevant, including cooperative work of the IPBES and IPCC. Something in this line.
So therefore, they're opposing views. We need to move ahead. I would like to get consensus on this paragraph. But I see that there are two sides, and I'm not seeing a way to have both sides represented. So I'm suggesting that we go ahead requesting the SOBSTA to further review the item on the basis of views and information from parties, other governments, and international organizations referred to in Para 1, and relevant scientific technical information on biodiversity and climate change. Making it as simple, nothing added at this meeting, at the 16th meeting. This is what I'm requesting. Can we make it simple? And just because then it covers, yes, we're not mentioning this, and yes, it is important to some parties, but it's a simple way to move forward without mentioning reports that some parties or workshops that some parties aren't able to mention. Is there some way that we can move forward with this as read? The simplified version of Para 2. Is there some way we can move forward with that, please? I see Canada has asked for the floor. Canada?
Thank you, Chair. Could you please read the paragraph again, one more time? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll read both. I'll read Para 1, requests parties and invites other governments and international organizations to submit their views and information on biodiversity and climate change, and requests the Executive Secretary to compile this information and make it available to SBSTA. Para 2, requests the SBSTA to further review the item on the basis of views and information from parties, other governments, and international organizations referred to in paragraph 1 above, and relevant scientific and technical information on biodiversity and climate change at its meeting to be held prior to the 16th meeting of the COP. Canada, I see. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We, in the interest of moving this item forward, we accept this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. We have before us the 2 operational paras as read. May we approve those 2 operational paragraphs? I see no request for the floor. These 2 operational paragraphs are approved. Thank you for your exceeding flexibility and compromise. Thank you to all parties for this. 1 minute, please. So therefore, with these 2 operational paragraphs, with a simple preambulatory para recalling the decisions, recalling the decisions, and in particular the critical role of biodiversity, ecosystem functions and services for climate change adaptation, and all of that, that was what we had before. And these 2 preambulatory paragraphs, I ask for approval to move right through to the L document. I see no request for the floor. The CRP is approved, and an LP document will be prepared for the COP. Thank you, everyone here, for your extreme flexibility and your willingness to compromise. Thank you so much. We'll move forward to the next document. Give me 1 minute, please. Okay, I have an announcement to make. The GBF contact group will be doing goal C and target 13 last, so as to avoid conflict with us considering the 2 NP CRPs. Okay, so therefore we'll be doing the next 2 NP CRPs right away. So, and the GCF contact group has taken this into consideration. We thank their indulgence. So therefore, we will be moving on to the CRP. 8 on Nagoya Protocol Map 4, Item 15, Specialized International ABS Instruments. Let us now turn to CRP 8 on Item 15 of the agenda of the meeting of parties in the Nagoya Protocol, Specialized International ABS Instruments. During this morning's sessions, we heard a clear indication from parties that they did not want to spend more time in lengthy consultations on this item to try to find an agreement. Therefore, I had read out my proposal text for a draft decision that is procedural and aims to ensure the item is taken up by COPMOP at its 5th meeting. I did not hear any objections to the idea of postponing this agenda item to COPMOP 5 this morning. Based on this, you have a CRP 8 before you. As the draft decision is only 2 paragraphs, I'd like to approve it as a whole. So therefore, we have before you CRP 8, and it has the 2 preambulatory paragraphs starting the conference of the parties and then noting the divergence, and it has para 1, takes note, and para 2, decides to. May we have approval of this CRP? I see no requests for the floor. This CRP is approved. An L document we prepared for the COP. Thank you. We now move on to CRP 7 on Nagoya Protocol, MOP 4, Item 16, Global Multilateral Benefit Sharing Mechanism. So I hope you have that before you, CRP 7. We had opened this item at our 3rd session on the 8th of December. At that time, we agreed that because this item was linked to other items being considered during our meetings, we would return to it later in the proceedings once related deliberations had a chance to advance. As we near the end of the meeting, it is time to return to this item. As you can see, I have prepared a simple CRP in which we decide to include this item on the agenda of the 5th meeting of the parties in the Nagoya Protocol and consider it in the light of the outcomes of work on the digital sequence information on genetic resources that it is anticipated to be undertaken in the next intersessional period. Before we begin discussing the CRP, I would like to make one correction. After consultation, I'm proposing that para 1 be deleted since the discussion on DSI and genetic resource is still pending, and also that the scope of Article 10 on Global Multilateral Benefit Sharing Mechanism may be broader than DSI. With the deletion of para 1, the draft decision now is only 1 paragraph, which I would like to approve as a whole. Can we agree to delete para 1? And can we agree to keeping para 2? There is an edit, and of course, the end of para 2 says, referred to paragraph 1 above would clearly have to be removed in editing. It would stop, I'll read it for you. Para 2 would read, decides to revisit the issue of the need for and modalities of a global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism as provided in Article 10 of the Nagoya Protocol at its 5th meeting, full stop. So therefore, you have CRP 7 for you. We're proposing that we delete para 1 and keep para 2, and para 2 would end at 5th meeting. I have this before, I put this before for your approval. I see no request for the floor. Therefore, CRP 7 is approved. An L document we prepared for consideration by the MOP. Thank you. The next document would be the CRP 13 on COP Item 18, multi-year program of work of the convention. Let us now turn our attention to CRP 13. I hope you have it before you. We have before us the CRP, and it was developed on the basis of proposals made during the consideration of this item. And we will review it para by para. The reason behind the brackets on the preamble paragraph is because we are still this is still under discussion. So therefore, I'm presenting to you the preambatory paragraphs as they remain in brackets to be dropped once the Global Biodiversity Framework is adopted. I see no request to the floor. The preambatory paragraphs in that state are approved. Para 1 notes that. I see the EU, you have the floor.
Apologies, Madam Colleague. Let me just very quickly get the document. We were on paragraph 2?
We hadn't gotten there yet.
Okay, apologies. I was too early. Thank you.
That's fine. So we're still at para 1. Notes that. I see no request to the floor. Para 1 is approved. Para 2 decides that. I see a request to the floor from the UK and then EU. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few suggestions on this paragraph, and in particular to relate to the work in the contact group under the agenda item 14 in the other working group, which has been looking at the planning, reporting and review mechanisms. And just to align this, a few suggestions just to align this with the work of that contact group, which is now prepared as a conference room paper for working group 1. So in the first line, we'd just like to suggest that at the end, where it reads for policy development, and we would then delete to support. So it would read for policy development and implementation. And then we would go on should and then delete be based on, and go on to support achievement. So it would read for policy development and implementation should support achievement of the goals and targets set out in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And then the terms that have been used in the draft decision for a global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and a global review of collective progress in implementation. So it would read, after its 2030 targets, the outcome of the global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and global review of collective progress in implementation. Those suggestions are just to align it with the draft decision from the other working group. Thank you.
May I beg your indulgence, UK? Would you be able to read that again slowly, please?
Yes, certainly. So I'll read the whole paragraph as it would read. Decides that the development of further guidance for policy development and implementation should support achievement of the goals and targets set out in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and especially its 2030 targets, the outcome of the global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and global review of collective progress in implementation, as well as new information that may become available, including through scientific assessments. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you. We want to read it to make sure we have everything. So let's I ask the Secretary to read it for me, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So paragraph 2 would read, decides that the development of further guidance for policy development and implementation should support achievement of the goals and targets set out in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and especially its 2030 targets, the outcome of the global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and global review of collective progress in implementation, as well as new information that may become available, including through scientific assessment.
Thank you. Thank you, UK. EU. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Co-Chair. Our suggestions went very much along the same lines as what UK just suggested, so I'm happy to support that wording. Perhaps just one suggestion. After the reference to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, well, before we already have the reference to goals and targets. They are both important, so for us we would prefer to delete and especially its 2030 targets, because the goals are also important. Thank you.
Yes. So now paragraph 2 with this further amendment will read as follows. Decides that the development of further guidance for policy development and implementation should support achievement of the goals and targets set out in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, the outcome of the global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and global review of collective progress in implementation, as well as new information that may become available, including through scientific assessments, sorry.
Thank you. And let us hear from Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We believe we were the one who made this proposal initially with regards to the goals and targets of the post-2020. The rationale for having, and especially its 2030 targets, is because we're speaking about the program of work for 2023 up to 2030. And so we want to ensure that the program of work aligns closely with the targets, but we can live with EU's proposal as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada, for your flexibility. So with the newly formulated para 2, I'm bringing that before you for approval. I see no requests for the floor. The newly formulated para 2 is approved. Para 3 takes note. I see no requests to the floor. Para 3 is approved. Para 4 requests the I see no requests to the floor. Para 4 is approved. Para 5 also requests. I see requests to the floor. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. A small amendment at the last line where it says, as specified in the annex, we would suggest changing specified for suggested, as the annex is not completed at this time. Thank you, Chair.
So therefore, as suggested, last line of para 5, instead of as specified, it's as suggested. So I'm putting before, I see EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's actually the same remark as for the previous paragraph. In the second line, it refers to especially the 2030 targets, but we find the goals, the entire framework important. So we suggest deleting especially the 2030 targets. Thank you.
So therefore, bringing before you para 3 with removal on the second line and especially the 2030 targets, and with exchanging on the last line that instead of specified we have suggested. I bring that newly formulated para 5 to the floor for approval. I see no requests to the floor. The newly formulated para 5 is approved. Para 6 decides to address. I see no requests to the floor. Decides to address is approved. I'd like to take the annex in its entirety. The annex consists of a table, and it looks at COP 16, 17, 18, and 19. And of course, they have to be completed. So the annex, as it is in its incomplete form, I bring before the floor. The annex is approved. I see 2 parties asking the floor. We have the EU, followed by the UK, EU, and then Japan. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I suggest the UK takes the floor first, as they were very closely involved in the decision that's still to be adopted on the review of implementation. And there are a couple of references that probably need to be aligned, and I trust the UK colleague is best placed to make those remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. We'll hear the UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you to the EU for giving me the floor. And in line with the comments introduced in paragraph 2, for COP16, in the first bullet, we would like to refer to global analysis of information on national targets. So that would mean delete review of and replace it with global analysis of information on national targets. Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, and sorry, if you want me to carry on, in COP17 then, just a small amendment there on the first bullet. It would be to add a global review of the implementation, as that is how it's referred to in the draft decision for the other working group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So therefore, UK, before you go, so for COP16, the first bullet, it should begin global analysis of the information on national targets. And then for COP17, the first bullet should read global review of the implementation. Is that correct? Please give UK the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I see Japan, followed by the EU. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My intervention is not a proposal for amendment for this draft decision. I would like to make a small comment for the further activity of Secretariat. We'd like to point out that it is very important to remind the parties that in implementation on the work of program by the Secretariat, we need to take into account the budget limit and ask the Secretariat to conduct work by using its resources effectively and efficiently. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will note that in the working group report. Thank you. So now we hear from EU, followed by Canada, and then UK. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor again. We had a few additional remarks in the row concerning COP17. In the first bullet, we understand the review that is referred here will be based on the 7th national reports, but it's not the only basis. So we would like to add after, on the basis of inter alia. And then the third bullet in this row, which concerns the review of the monitoring framework. In fact, the draft decision, as we understand, provides already for review at COP16 and then for keeping it under review. And as in the first operational paragraph, we refer to other decisions, perhaps this bullet is simply not necessary and we don't need to specify that then for all the COPs. So we would suggest deleting that bullet on the review of the monitoring framework. And then the last remark concerns COP18 and 19. The second bullet for COP19 concerns the considerations for a follow-up to the post-2020 global biodiversity, for post-2030 global biodiversity, the follow-up to the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Of course, we haven't finished the adoption of our GBF yet, but when we think about the next one, we would like to start considering this already at COP18, so that we have a decision for the process, so that we have a timely follow-up to the current one, the new one, which we are still to adopt. As you can see, we are very fond of negotiating global biodiversity frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. So let me make sure I have your amendments. So therefore, for under COP17, the first bullet, the second line of the first bullet, you have on the basis of inter alia, the 7th national report, yes. And then you want to remove the third bullet for COP17. And then for COP18, we will move the second bullet in COP19 to COP18. Yes, and the placement shouldn't matter. Yes, okay, thank you. I think I have that. So now we hear from Canada, please. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 points to raise. We believe that in our submission, we recommended that we remove the elements from COP17 to COP19, as these will be up for consideration at SBI 4. And so we don't disagree with the EU's proposal, but we think we can also simply remove the list for COP17 and COP19 and push this for further consideration at SBI 4. With regards to the proposal from UK to better align the wording with regards to item 14 and to change to global analysis, we want to apologize for opening clean text, but we believe that this wording should also be reflected in paragraph 1 of the draft decision, as it currently notes that parties will review the progress on implementation. We think that a global analysis perhaps might be a better wording in this context. Thank you, Chair.
Don't go yet, please. So I'm going to take your last point first. So permit me, because I want to make sure the operational, what's in the draft decision is correct before we approve the annex, please. So you're suggesting for para 1, please tell me the suggestion again. You're moving implementation and replacing it with analysis?
Yes,
Okay.
maybe I would turn to our distinguished colleagues from UK who are leading on this issue on the monitoring, reporting, and review element to reflect the exact current wording. But we want to make sure that the wording that will be that is being considered right now is reflected as well in paragraph 1.
Okay, so we'll go to UK, but I will still need to come back to you regarding your first point, because I don't think I got that. Okay, so UK, we're asking if you can take the floor regarding going back to para 1 to make sure the wording is in line.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, in relation to Canada's comments, I think this is the intention of my earlier intervention. And so in paragraph 2, it refers to two things. One is a global analysis of information in MB SAPs, and the other is a global review of collective progress. And those are the two elements that then appear under COP16, the global analysis of information. Here it's referred to as national targets rather than MB SAP. So, I mean, if you want to be precise, it would refer to national. If you give me a moment, I'll get that wording up.
While UK is thinking about it, let's give them a minute. Coming back to you, Canada. So therefore, I'm asking you about your the first intervention, the first part of your intervention, and I'm asking you if what's written in paragraph 5 doesn't cover what your concerns are. Could you look at that again and indicate?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We can certainly be flexible with regards to the table for references to COP17 up to 19. It was more to make a point that these will be considered by SBI, and so what is in here might not reflect the outcome that will be before parties in the end. So we can live with what's in here now and bring that forward to SBI at its 4th meeting. Thank you, Chair. Along with the EU proposals.
Yes, thank you, and yes, and it is a preliminary list, yes. So thank you for that flexibility, and then I don't know if the UK is ready. Are you, yes, yes, okay, they seem to be ready. Thank you. You have the floor, UK.
Yes, thank you. So the wording from the decision, which is quite lengthy, is a global analysis of information in MB SAPs, including their national targets. So if you want to be entirely consistent, then you could use that language in both places. So it's a global analysis of information in MB and national biodiversity strategies and action plans, including their national targets.
Thank you, UK. Can you give us the placement, please, so we are sure that we have it?
So in paragraph 2, we already have a global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans. Then you would add including their national targets. and continue and global review. And if you want to go on, then in the first bullet on COP16, it would be a global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, including their national targets.
So to clarify, 1 does not need amendment. It
No.
can be put in 2 and also in the table.
So it's paragraph 2 and the first bullet under COP16.
Yes, thank you. So 1 will remain clean. So we're really only just amending 2. So with that in mind, this new, just the addition as to make sure it's exactly in line with the other decision, we have amended 2 to reflect that. Switzerland, yes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I just wanted to point out that it's not needed to amend paragraph 1, so therefore I don't need the floor anymore. Thank you. I agree with what is proposed.
Okay, thank you. So therefore I'm asking, EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure that I understood it correctly, could I ask to read out the text of paragraph 2 as it now stands?
Yes, we will read it out and also read out the updated COP16 in the table to make sure that we have it correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, paragraph 2 would read, decides that the development of further guidance for policy development and implementation should support achievement of the goals and targets set out in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, the outcome of the global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, including their national targets, and global review of collective progress in implementation, as well as new information that may become available, including through scientific assessments. And in the table for COP16, the first bullet would read, global analysis of information in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, including the national targets.
Thank you. So I'll take the newly reformulated 2 and the entire annex for approval on the floor. So you have before you 2 and the entire annex. I see no request for the floor. Para 2 and the annex are approved. And therefore, the entire CRP 13 is approved. CRP 13 is approved. An L document will now be prepared for consideration at the COP. Thank you for all your hard work in considering our CRPs, and thank you that we're able to convert them into L documents, which will be now considered by the plenary. And I'm confident that we can conclude this meeting after we have finished our last task, which would be considering the working group report. Therefore, let us look at the document CBD COP /15 / working group 2 /L1. Okay. I suggest, just a minute, please. Okay, so we have a correction to make before we start going through it, and I propose that we go through it page by page. So I'll give the floor to the Secretariat to read that correction. Secretariat, you have the floor when you're ready.
The correction is on line 101, and it is the removal of the last sentence and the correction on the final document number. So I will read out the full paragraph as it should stand. It is Working Group 2 took up item CP5 at its second meeting on 8 December. In considering the item, the working group had before it a draft decision on the matter, which was based on the recommendations of the Compliance Committee contained in the annex to the report on the work of its 16th and 17th meetings, CBD-CP MOP 10-2, and was set out in the compilation of draft decisions CBD-CP MOP 104-1 add 5. Full stop.
All right, so thank you. Secretariat, we will now consider the draft report. Let's go by item. I'd initially said page by page, but I think that it's better to do item by item. So therefore, we look at the preambulatory bit, the first and second paragraph. I see no request for the floor. That is approved. Let's look at COP 15, item 15A, Program of Work of the IPBES, and that includes para 3 to 7. I see the EU. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have an editorial comment. This is referring to paragraph 5, but then also throughout the document, there is a reference to the European Union, and it reads also on behalf of its member states. So we would like to kindly ask you for a correction. It should read the European Union and its 27 member states. So if we may kindly ask you to correct this throughout the document, because as you will understand, there are references to the European Union at many places. So it should always read the European Union and its member states. Thank you very much.
Just to verify, and so the correction is, in brackets, we should have, and it's 27 member states, EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's just one more editorial note in paragraph 6. The name of the co-chair from Germany is Janina Heim, with an M at the end instead of an N. It is a small mistake, but bears noting anyways.
So don't go as yet, please. So to verify, on paragraph 5, the last line, it should say the European Union in brackets and its 27 member states, close brackets, and have that text everywhere it shows up. And then on para 6 is Janina Heim, H-E-I-M. Yes? Okay. I see the EU again. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies, just to confirm, it should read the European Union and its 27 member states. There should be no brackets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, so that would be made throughout the document. So therefore, consideration of COP item 15A, paras 3 to 7, the newly formulated version. I see no request for the floor. Those paragraphs are approved. Next, item NP 5, report of the Compliance Committee, looking at paras 8 to 11. I see no request for the floor. Those paragraphs from 8 to 11 are approved. Thank you. Considering NP item 7 on financial mechanism and resources, Article 25, paras 12 to 15. I see no request for the floor. This area, 12 to 15, are approved. NP item 8, measures to assist, I see the EU. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm referring to para 17 regarding the statements that were made under this agenda item. I believe that European Union and its 27 member states have also made a statement there, so we would kindly ask you to refer to this as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Therefore, with the amendment to para 17, I ask for approval for paras 16 to 19. I see no further requests to the floor. Those paragraphs are approved. Next, looking at NP item 9, access and benefit sharing, clearinghouse, etc. So we're looking at para 20 to 23. This is up for consideration, para 20 to 23. I see no request for the floor. Paragraphs 20 to 23 are approved. Considering NP item 10, monitoring and reporting, paragraphs 24 to 27. I see no request for the floor for paragraphs 24 to 27. These are approved. Thank you. NP item 11, cooperation with other international organizations, etc. This is looking at para 28 to 29. I see no request for the floor. Paragraphs 28 and 29 are approved. NP item 15 on specialized international access and benefit sharing instruments, etc. This is paragraph 30 to 36. I see no request for the floor. Paragraphs 30 to 36 are approved. NP item 16 on global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism. I see Togo. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for coming back slightly to point 15, or item 15. I think the final decision that was adopted, namely to refer this agenda item to the next COP, I think that we could put that in under to be completed and list that as such.
Yes, Togo. Thank you. That will be reported. Thank you. So therefore, going back to item 15, paras 30 to 36. No request to the floor. That is approved. NP item 16, global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism, paras 37 to 39. (39) is to be completed as well. I see no request to the floor. Those paragraphs are approved. COP item 17, review of the effectiveness. We're looking at paragraphs 40 to 46. I see no request for the floor. Paragraphs 40 to 46 are approved. CP item 13, review of the effectiveness. Looking at paragraphs 47 and 48. I see no request for the floor. Paragraph 40 and 48 are approved. NP item 12, review of effectiveness. Paragraph 49 and 50. I see no request for the floor. Paragraphs 49 and 50 are approved. COP item 18, the multi-year program of work. We're looking at paragraphs 51 to 54. Yes, we have to complete 54 to indicate what happened today. I see no request for the floor. These paragraphs are approved. COP item 19, paragraph 55 to 57. Protected areas and other affected areas conservation measures. I see no request for the floor. Paragraphs 55 to 57 are approved. COP item 20 on marine and coastal biodiversity, so we take it section by section. COP item 20A on EBSA's para 58. I see no request to the floor. Para 58 is approved. COP item 20A1, paragraphs 59 to 62. I see no request to the floor. Para 59 to 62 are approved. COP item 20A2, considering paragraphs 63 to 68. I see no request to the floor. These paragraphs are approved, 63 to 68. Thank you. COP item 20B, conservation and sustainable use. Looking at paragraphs 69 to 75. I see no request to the floor. Paragraphs 69 to 75 are approved. COP item 21 on invasive alien species. Paragraphs 76 to 78. I see no request to the floor. These paragraphs are approved. COP item 22, sustainable wildlife management. Paragraphs 79 to 81. I see no request to the floor. Paragraphs 79 to 81 are approved. COP item 23, biodiversity and climate change. Paragraphs 82 to 88. Yes, 88 has to be completed to indicate what happened today. I see no request to the floor. Paragraphs 82 to 88 are approved. COP item 24 on biodiversity and agriculture. These are paragraphs 89 to 94. I see no request to the floor. Paragraphs 89 to 94 are approved. COP item 25 on biodiversity and health. Paragraphs 95 to 98. I see the EU. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more note, exceedingly similar to the previous one. In paragraph 97, with the reference to the co-facilitators, we believe the names of the representatives should be included. So if you allow me, I can read them out. This would be Barbara Engels from Germany, so Barbara Engels, and Andrew Rhodes Espinoza from Mexico.
Thank you. Yes, we will include those names. Thank you very much for that. So paragraphs 95, 96, the amended 97 and 98 are before the floor. Paragraph, I see no requests, any further requests for the floor, so paragraphs 95, 96, amended 97, and 98 are approved. Thank you. COP item 26 on nature and culture, paras 99 to 101. I see no requests for the floor. These paragraphs are approved. COP item 27 on synthetic biology, paragraphs 102 to 108 are before us. I see no requests for the floor. Therefore, paragraphs 102 to 108 are approved. CP item 5, report of the Compliance Committee, paragraph 109 to 112. I see no requests for the floor. Paragraphs 109 to 112 are approved. CP item 7, implementation plan and capacity building action plan. for Cartagena Protocol. That's paragraph 113 to 118. I see no request to the floor. These paragraphs are approved. CP item 8, monitoring and reporting, paragraphs 119 to 122. I see no request to the floor. Paragraphs 119 to 122 are approved. CP item 9, 123 to 125. I see no request to the floor. Paragraphs 123 to 125 are approved. CP item 10, matters related to financial mechanisms. Paragraphs 126 to 129. I see no request to the floor. Paragraphs 126 to 129 are approved. CP item 11, operation and activities of the Biosafety Clearinghouse. Paragraphs 130 to 134. I see no requests for the floor. Paragraphs 130 to 134 are approved. CP item 12, cooperation with other organizations, convention initiatives. That's paragraphs 135 and 136. I see EU. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a small correction that we would like to kindly request. This is a Cartagena Protocol item. However, the reference to the documents is to Nagoya Protocol item. So just a minor correction there, if you may kindly ask me so. Thank you very much.
Thank you for pointing that out. We will make that correction. Thank you. So therefore, paras 135 to 136. I see no further requests to the floor, and with the amendments, I take it it's approved. It's approved. Thank you. CP item 14, risk assessment and risk management. Paragraphs 137 to 140. I see no requests to the floor. Paragraphs 137 to 140 are approved. CP item 15, detection and identification of LMOs. As paragraphs 141 to 148. I see no requests to the floor. Paragraphs 141 to 148 are approved. CP item 16, socioeconomic considerations. Para 149 to 153. I see no requests to the floor. Paragraphs 149 to 153 are approved. CP item 17, Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Protocol on Liability and Redress. Paras 154 to 157. I see no requests to the floor. Paragraphs 154 to 157 are approved. Therefore, the entire report is approved. Thank you. We can now send this report, working group report, as an L document to plenary. Thank you. This, delegates, amazingly completes our assignment of working group 2. I want to thank each and every one of you, all the co-chairs, the secretariat, for getting us to this point. And I appreciate everybody willing to step in and work and come into a huddle and go into groups and stay long hours and discuss and find solutions. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for your great spirit. Thank you so much for your hard work and flexibility in finding solutions to move us forward. I appreciate this being part of this journey with you, and I wish you all the best. This session is now ended. Thank you very much.